Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
You know, I have been meaning for 2 solid weeks to ask you a question, and I have not remembered to do it on the podcast. So, Gerd,
All right.
Are you taking the opportunity that is in front of you right now, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, to grow some terrible facial hair?
That terrible facial hair is the only kind I can grow. And after a while, my wife will look at me and be like, you know, you're starting to look homeless. Can you do something about it? Like last Friday, I hadn't shaved, I think, in 2 weeks, and I was going to do a YouTube for Mark Rogers. And I'm like looking at myself on the laptop. I'm like, you know what? I better shave before this show. And so, no, I'm not. I'm pretty much doing the same thing I always did, whereas I would eventually shave before I had to be somewhere in public. What about you?
Yeah, I have not shaved in at least a couple weeks now. I have never been a facial hair person, just because it doesn't come in, you know, nice and thick and lustrously like
Right.
Ryan Day's beard does.
Oh yeah, forget it.
I figured, like, this is it. This is my chance. I can just, when I'm on a Zoom meeting, I'll just set up my computer so that there's a window behind me, so you can't really see me. Like, oh, am I backlit? Oh, that's too bad. It's not bad. It's just the mustache doesn't quite connect to the beard part. And looking at the mustache, I'm concerned. I look like Farva from Super Troopers. So I'm not sure this is going to be something that's going to stick around, but you know, I mean, it's you know, this is an opportunity. Let's make the most of it.
Well, see, I also have a bad situation where, you know, I grew up blonde, and so, but my mustache is still blonde, and the beard part is brown and black, and there's some gray, but we don't need to talk about that. And so it doesn't work. Like, I know a few years ago, I came downstairs with a goatee, and my wife saw it. She's like, "No," just like pointed back upstairs, like I just got grounded. You go back upstairs and you think about what you did, and you get rid of that goatee, Mister. And so, no, it's, you know, it's no different than what I've always done, which is to say, once I start getting the stink eye for looking homeless. And then the thing is, like, my hair will get really curly, and after a long time not having a haircut. And so then I've got the homeless vibe to me that for some reason my wife gets annoyed by it. I don't know.
I married a man with a home. I did not say with or without a home in my marriage vows.
Yeah. So yeah, no, business as usual. Which is the only place in the entire world where business is still as usual for me, other than working from home, I guess.
Yeah, it's this is, I have written about this, but this is a chance to, if you've ever wanted to try something, this is your chance to try it. And sometimes it's going to work, and sometimes it's not, and that's okay. And I think every woman in the world, all of my wife's friends, are deeply concerned that they're going to, at the end of this, have, you know, a whole bunch of gray hair showing, and it's like, yeah, everyone's in the same boat. No one can go get a haircut right now, so just let's make the most of this. Let's give it a shot and see what we come up with.
Well, then I was looking for hair clippers online, and it was almost like you were trying to search for toilet paper like 2 or 3 weeks ago. They're all, everything is sold out because everybody's going to have to be doing their hair cutting from home. So then what I should have done, Tom, is gone to eBay and searched for a Flowbee.
What, you don't already have one?
Yeah. it's like NCAA 14 and Flowbee. You know, the only place you can get them now are eBay, and they're both an arm and a leg. Tom, did you see the article today about the University of Pittsburgh having what they believe is a vaccine for the coronavirus?
I did. I also saw maybe the greatest tweet that could possibly sum up the University of Pittsburgh potentially saving the world. I am pulling it up right now as I am vamping. Pitt's going to beat the coronavirus and then lose to Athlete's Foot. That, friends, that is the content we are here for, right there. That is. Now I'm going to forget which podcast is. One of the national podcasts. I think it was one of the SB Nation ones. Has the recurring joke about the Pitt super weapon, which the Pitt super weapon is just charging all season, and then it just discharges like the Death Star destroying Alderaan. It's charging all season, and then they get number 2 Miami at the end of the year, and boom, the super weapon discharges and destroys number 2 Miami. That's Pitt. Pitt is going to destroy coronavirus and then lose to Athlete's Foot. That was from at L.E. Brown Low, if you are interested. I have no idea what else this person has tweeted in their life, but boy, that was some good content right there.
They don't need to tweet anything else after that. That's it. You just, the one tweet, you can stanza it, you pin it, and you never tweet again. Can you imagine like Pitt being shut down for Athlete's Foot? Like, we've got a fungus outbreak. We hope to have students back by July. But right now, if you've got Tenactin, we could certainly use it. We will trade you some N95 masks. Just help us out.
Oh,
so that's Pitt.
Now, just getting to think about Pitt football and all that Pitt football stands for, like that is just what I needed this week.
So then somebody on the board mentioned that it's too bad we didn't invite Pitt to the Big Ten. And I was thinking, yeah, I mean, the whole, you got to be an academic stellar institution, blah, blah, blah. And you find out like Pitt's got all of this long history of stuff where they're vaccinations for polio and Jonas Salk and all of that stuff. Like they should be. Sure, we look down on the Yinzers, but if you go ahead and you beat coronavirus, that should be an automatic invite into the Big Ten, right?
Well, do you know what the centerpiece building of the entire Pittsburgh campus is called?
No.
It is 535 feet tall. It is 42 floors. It is called the Cathedral of Learning. Like that's pretty metal. Like that's all right. Like I can get down with the Cathedral of Learning.
So that would be 15 teams. Then the question becomes, do you add a team or do you allow Pitt to kick somebody out?
Rutgers.
But it's up to Pitt.
Rutgers.
So do you think they would kick out Rutgers? Or, Tom, do you think they would look east a little bit and see their Penn State brethren, and say, you know what? You've had your almost, 28 years, thereabouts. It's time for you to maybe go do something else. Become the independent that your fans want you to be once again. Get out of the Big Ten, but leave the cannoli.
Here's my counteroffer. What if we take Pitt and we get rid of everyone east of Pitt? Goodbye Maryland, goodbye Rutgers, goodbye Penn State. That shortens a lot of our drives. Oh. I would be perfectly happy to just go to Pittsburgh instead of Maryland or Piscataway or BFE Pennsylvania. Like, yep, I'm fine with all of that, and I'm fine even if they don't cure coronavirus. Can we do that anyway? Big 10 to 12 teams and add Pitt and lose everyone east of Pitt.
Well, you say that, but right now I would happily drive to all of those places as long as it would be promised to have the football season this year. I would drive to Piscataway. We would drive to Maryland. Hell, I would drive to Eugene right now. If you tell me like that sacrifice, and I would probably even like a Geo Metro. Give me a Geo Metro. I will figure out a way to get my knees in there, and we will putt along. Now you and Dan and whoever else may want to choose a different route. That's fine. I'll take one for the team here. I will be the person driving to Eugene just so that we can have a college football season. And I would, yeah, go ahead.
Do you know how many hours it is to drive from Columbus to Eugene? Because I do. I just looked it up.
I'm going to guess about 36.
Wow, you're way off. It's 37. But maybe, you set the cruise like 4 miles an hour over the limit. That's and right. You're there in 36. Mm-hmm. So, Yeah, no, you nailed it exactly. So yes,
Exactly.
So you do know what you're signing up for. Yeah, Ohio to Indiana to Illinois to Iowa to Nebraska to Wyoming to Utah to Idaho to Oregon. That is a lot of states, and some of them are long. But you know what? That's fine. If you could guarantee me right now that college football will start on time and go as scheduled, yep, I would get into Geo Metro with you and drive to Eugene, Oregon.
I think what we should do is take the route that they did in National Lampoon's Vacation, the Griswolds, but obviously we'd have to go up to Chicago, and then eventually we would, wherever they break off in California, we would just have to then drive straight north. But whatever it takes to make it happen, we are willing to go the extra 2,000 miles or whatever it might be. So just a small price to pay.
Only if we can stop and see the largest freestanding mud dwelling ever built. That's my only thing that I'm non-negotiable. Freestanding mud
Okay,
dwelling.
we can do that as long as we don't have to go to your cousin Eddie's.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I forget which of his kids are there in this movie, so it's not Rocky. It's
All right. All right. Tom, you want to get back to the show?
Yeah, why don't we talk about college football since while we're here?
So the NCAA this week, it's not college football related, but the NCAA has granted an extra year of eligibility for the spring athletes in lacrosse, baseball, tennis, those sports. I think Ohio State has 12 sports that are affected by it. They're not including the winter athletes, the wrestlers, and the basketball players because their seasons were pretty much over. They just didn't get a postseason. But the interesting thing about all of this is the spring athletes, those sports aren't full scholarship sports. With the women's lacrosse, I think they have 12 scholarships, maybe a little over 12 scholarships among 30 or 40 players. Baseball has 11.7 among their 30-odd players. And we talked to Ty Tucker, the tennis coach at Ohio State last week, and the women's lacrosse coach, Nick Myers, the men's lacrosse coach, and one other coach. And among all of these teams, only one coach had one player on full scholarship. But what this thing will allow them to do now is they get to retain players at the same level they were at. So it just adds an extra roster spot, and the school will then pay for it. But Tom, what we're seeing is not everybody wants to come back because, that's your senior. You're a senior now. You're a graduate. Women's lacrosse, their coach said they had 7 seniors on this team, and only 2 are coming back because everybody else had jobs lined up. Or for some players around the country, they're not going to be able to afford to come back because they either have to take out loans or out of pocket, or you apply for grants. So the NCAA has done this. They have left it up to the schools to decide if they want to pay for it. Ohio State right away said they would. So, Tom, overall, it's a good thing, but there's still all kinds of issues that come with it that coaches are now having to deal with.
Right. I mean, it's the right thing to do, and good for them for doing it. And I get why they didn't do the winter sports as well, especially because winter sports, you've got some higher profile stuff there with, basketball players, potentially coming back, and full scholarship sports makes it a little bit more of a complication on the school side. So I get the decision not to do the winter side of things. But yeah, it seems like from the outside looking in, just without thinking about it, it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm sure they all want to come back and play one more year and get that last chance to be a lacrosse player or softball player or whatever before the start of the, before they start being grown-ups. But yeah, if you're not on a full ride, that's a much more complicated decision, because then it's like, Mom, Dad, I'd like you to pay for another year of college, or 3/4 of a year of college if I'm on a quarter a scholarship or whatever it is, to play softball again. But I'm already, I'm already on track to graduate. I have a job lined up. Like, yeah, you've got to. That's not as easy a choice as it might seem on the surface. But it's nice that then the student athletes have some agency in deciding how their career ends. Like that's the thing that really stunk, is the people who, this was it. This is going to be my last year, and now it's over before it even starts. So now they at least have some choice in the matter, which is good. It may not be exactly what they want, but if they want to come back, they at least have that option, which is nice.
And that was one of the things one of the coaches said. Just having the option is that was as much as they could ask for, and they were given much more than that, with Ohio State providing the same level of money as the year before. Greg Beals, baseball coach, said, well, this also gives everybody just another year. And so now the 10 freshmen that he brought in this past year will be combined with basically the 10 freshmen coming into his current class, and he's going to have 20 freshmen, which, that's a lot on a team, because the season, there's no season. So now all of these players are essentially new. It's almost like the difference between, I guess, the early enrollees for football who get to take part in spring and the ones who don't, and they come into summer. That's kind of what's going on with baseball, because there was some baseball going on. So those freshmen got to experience that, but now they're going to be basically freshmen again next year. And you've got this very young team, and you've got to figure out that stuff as well. So it'll be, we'll see how it all shakes out. Everybody's trying to make do with the situation at hand. And there's going to probably, Tom, I assume, we'll talk about this maybe in the next show, but there's going to be likely some crazy things that college football has to do if they can't start on time. So, you just do what you can right now.
Right, exactly. This is not the biggest issue facing the world right now, is the college baseball scholarship count and the inequity of who has gotten to play so many games or whatever, or college football teams that have had more spring practices than others. There are bigger issues facing the world right now, but I'm sure everyone is really looking forward to having this be one of the bigger issues in their lives when we're back to being deeply concerned about college baseball scholarships or college football spring practices. That will be a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yeah, Tom, my kingdom for a 100 post thread on it's not fair that Texas's media guide is 300 pages and Oklahoma State's is only 78.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's Oklahoma State's biggest issue, but even then, I'm not sure it was. But that will. I am really excited to have the how is this a serious problem that you're seriously mad about kind of discussion.
Oh yes, that's right.
Those would be great. Those would be great.
Yeah, that'll be nice to get back to. So the other news then this week is that Kaleb Wesson has declared that he is entering he's entering the NBA draft and hiring an agent. That's the same thing he did last year and was still able to come back. You can hire an agent as long as you get rid of that agent before a certain date. And this year, it was originally June 15th. Who knows what it's going to be now. But just reading his letter, he tweeted out a letter to Buckeye Nation, and everything about it seems like there's no wishy-washy to it. Like this is a goodbye. I can read it very well here. Once our season was declared over, my family, coaches, and I began discussions on what the future held for me. After careful thought and consideration, I have decided to declare for the NBA draft. I intend to sign with an agent to help with this process. I want to thank the fans. I want to first thank the fans who have supported my father, Keith, mother, Stephanie, Andre, and me during our playing and academic careers with the Buckeyes. We have been blessed as a family to have been a part of such a great university and storied basketball program. Secondly, to all my teammates, thank you for helping and supporting me over my 3 seasons. What we accomplished together, 2 NCAA tournaments, and for sure another had we been able to play this season out to the end. There were so many great moments, huge wins, and experiences we had together that I will never forget. Last but not least, to my coaches, thank you. You have supported and helped me reach my goals and put my name in the record books as one of the top all-time scorers and rebounders in Ohio State history. So that is not, to me, a letter of, I'm going to put my foot in the water. This is a letter to me, Tom, that he is diving headfirst into the process, which is something that he and Chris Holtmann have planned all along because they didn't have room for him on next year's team until DJ Carton left and Alonzo Gaffney left. But, Tom, does any of this speak to you as if he will be coming back?
No, you read that and it's like, well, that door is closed. that it very, very much like, okay, I'm leaving. So long and thanks for all the fish. It's just I think we have thought all year that this was probably it for him. Like, he came back, he slimmed down, got in incredible shape, had a great season. But with him, I think it's just an issue that I don't know how much better he's going to be next year or how much he's going to be able to help his draft stock if he comes back another year. Like, he kind of is what he is. His strengths are his strengths, his weaknesses are his weaknesses, and they're not things that he's going to get markedly better at. As soon as I saw him, I think it was at a football game, like on the sidelines of a football game last year, and I looked at him and I'm like, who is that guy? He looked familiar. And I think I took a picture of him and I'm like, is that Kaleb Wesson? Like, he had lost like 30 pounds, it looked like. He looked like a totally different person. And it just immediately, it was just like, okay, so this is the J.K. Dobbins contract year thing, where it's like, okay, I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to work out. I'm going to do everything right because this is my contract year. I'm not going to be, J.K. Dobbins was very similar. There's nothing J.K. Dobbins could have done next year to move from like a low first round pick to like a, fifth in the draft kind of pick. Like, he did what he could do. Now he's moving on. Kaleb Wesson is very much the same thing. Like, he did everything he could. He put together a great season, got himself in great shape, stayed out of trouble, did everything right, and now this is his chance. Go get your, go see if you can make an NBA team. If you can't make an NBA team, go play overseas somewhere. Go start making money. Like, there's nothing he was going to do next year that was going to suddenly turn him into like a high lottery pick. That just wasn't going to happen. So yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense for me to think that he would come back. And reading that letter, I think he's probably in that same mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he entered it last year, went through some of the process and got feedback on what he needed to do. So he came back this year and pretty clearly tried to do that. Ended up leading the team in 3-point shooting at 42.5%. So I would assume that he was told, well, you're going to have to be kind of a stretch four because you're not the athletic guy who's going to be slashing. You're going to have to be a guy who can catch and shoot and maybe get some rebounding done. And so that's what he has worked on. And that's, I'm maybe a late second round in the draft, but that doesn't mean the NBA for him. A lot of those guys, they get drafted that late. And you go through the summer leagues and maybe you end up in the G League or you sign overseas for more money and the NBA, that team will still have your rights and eventually you try to work yourself back if you can. So that's where Kaleb Wesson is. It's going to be, I don't want to say a short team, Tom. We talked about this before, but it's going to be a short team next year in terms of what's going on in the post. And we'll see what how they handle that next year. It'll be not ideal, but interesting.
Right. You've got one guy on that team who's taller than 6'8", I believe, and he is almost certainly not really ready for prime time yet. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they'll look at this. I mean, I feel like every year we say Chris Holtmann's going to have to do an incredible coaching job to get this team back in the tournament, and that's probably what we'll all be saying going into next year if Kaleb Wesson isn't back. And then every year Chris Holtmann gets his team in the tournament. So, yeah. I think you're probably looking at another 20-win probably team next year, and he'll just kind of figure it out, and there'll be a 5 seed in the tournament again. And if he get hot, that's enough to go somewhere pretty good.
All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is something that one of our Patreon patrons, AZ Nate, wanted us to discuss, which is the quote unquote perceived talent gap between Ohio State and Michigan. And this is based on the Michigan podcast, which is the title is Michigan Podcast by Steve Dace. And you can find it on YouTube if you want. I've listened to it here and there periodically when I want to know, when I'm just trying to catch up on what's going on with Michigan. But I don't know if this started because of what I wrote, the series I've been writing starting a few weeks ago about just the widening of the talent gap based on what the rosters look like now in terms of the recruiting between Ohio State and Jim Harbaugh. And this was sort of his response to it. I know other people have written about it since I did, but he went on one of his most recent podcasts. He's doing some small bits on YouTube, and it was the top 5 reasons there isn't the perceived, and he says perceived talent gap between Ohio State and Michigan. And first off, I'm wondering if, Tom, you can help me out here maybe, when we say, does he acknowledge there's a talent gap, or is he saying perceived talent gap as if the gap isn't as big? It's there, but it's not as big as you think. It seems to me like he's saying there is no talent gap.
I mean, the first thing, you put some slides from his YouTube
yes.
in the rundown here, and the first one says, the perceived talent gap that exists between Ohio State and Michigan now is the same as it has been for decades, even at the historic level of recruiting the Buckeyes are currently doing. So, I mean, I guess that means he thinks they're basically even, or Ohio State is slightly ahead, but not much. But, I mean, it's just not true. You can look at the recruiting rankings and it's just extremely not true unless you want to really, spin the numbers in the most positive way possible for Michigan. And I think as we get into this a little further, you will see that, yes, that is what he's doing. So that is what he wants to do. But, you look at the top 100 players, national players that Ohio State's signing versus how many Michigan signing. It's like, no, there is not even close to the same level of recruiting at those two schools right now. Not even close.
Well, when we talk about talent gap, I just immediately go to watching Chris Olave against Brandon Watson in 2018. And you tell me there's no talent gap there. Just watching him destroy Watson repeatedly, or the scores of the last 2 games. It's not all coaching on Michigan's part, and it's not all lack of development. Those things can also exist while you're being destroyed in recruiting, and the rosters are being separated more and more. The second slide on this one, Tom, was number 2. During the famous 10-year war between Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes from 1969 to 78, Ohio State had 88 players drafted into the NFL, including 15 first-rounders. Michigan had 74 players picked, including 8 first-rounders. Bo went 5-4-1 against Woody during that time, and Ohio State didn't score an offensive touchdown in the final 3 meetings. Now, when I went through and counted up the draft picks, instead of 88 for Ohio State, I had 75, and I had 74 for Michigan. Did you, perchance, count them up as well?
I did not go through the whole decade, but what I did was I went through. Since he talked about the last 3 meetings and Ohio State not scoring an offensive touchdown in the final 3 meetings, I went through and looked at, the 3 NFL drafts before those final 3 years and the 3 NFL drafts after those final 3 years, and the difference in the talent there. And so just to give you an idea, So the 1974, 1975, and 1976 NFL drafts. So those were after Archie Griffin's sophomore, junior, and senior seasons. Ohio State went 2-0-1 against Michigan those years. Ohio State had 32 draft picks, 8 first-round draft picks. Michigan had 26 draft picks and 2 first-round draft picks. So that's 8 first-round draft picks for Ohio State, 2 for Michigan. So that's when Ohio State is dominating. Ohio State goes 3-0-1 those 4 years before that. So 32-26 and 8-2. So then in the 4 years after that, so the 77, 78, and 79 and 1980 drafts. So after the 3 years that Ohio State lost their final 3 games under Woody, Michigan had more draft picks and more first-round draft picks, 24 draft picks to 18, 4 first-round draft picks to 3. So Ohio State went from 8 first-round draft picks in a 3-year span to 3 in a 4-year span. And Michigan went from 2 in a 3-year span to 4 in a 4-year span. So it wasn't that Michigan got substantially better. I mean, Michigan's talent basically remained the same. It was just Ohio State's talent basically went off a cliff after the Archie Griffin and Brian Bushnagel and Pete Johnson and all those guys. After those guys left, Ohio State's talent went off a cliff, basically, from 32 draft picks and 8 first-rounders in 3 years to 18 and 3 in 4 years. That's the difference. And if you take the whole 10 years, the numbers look extremely even, but Ohio State's talent was so loaded at the front part of that decade, and then it went completely down at the end of the decade. That's it. That's it. And Woody was getting to the end of his career and wasn't as sharp as he was at the beginning of the career, and was not as creative and innovative as he might have been earlier in his career. But the talent, to act like the talent and just take it over that 10-year span and act like this is just an exactly evenly spaced amount of talent, nope, not even close. Wrong.
Well, then I also went through those 10 years, and back then the draft was 17, 18 rounds. Now it's 7 rounds. And so I just went through it and looked at what number of players were drafted after the 7th round. And of Ohio State's 75 draft picks, 38 were drafted after the 7th round. So more than half. Of Michigan's 74 draft picks, only 28 were drafted after the 7th round. So what's that? 46 of their players were drafted in the first 7 rounds, meaning they were more top heavy. They had higher draft picks other than the first round. So when you, like you said, Tom, when you just look at it over a 10-year span, it doesn't tell the story of even a block of time, the smaller blocks of time, and it spreads things out and you kind of lose the message. Now that second point continues, and it continues this way. Since Jim Harbaugh has been at Michigan, and his first year was 2015, Ohio State has had 35 players chosen in the NFL draft, including 12 in the first round. There have been 21 Wolverines picked, but just 4 first-rounders. However, the Buckeyes had 5 of those first-rounders come in the 2016 draft alone before Harbaugh even had a full recruiting cycle in Ann Arbor. I don't know really what the last half of that, what kind of point that's necessarily proving. But Tom, when you consider that they've had 12 since the 2016 draft, they're going to have at least 2 more this month, which is 14 in the span of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, in the span of 5 years, you're going to have at least 14. And we're talking, back in the 10-year war, Ohio State had 15 over a 10-year span. Now you've got 14 in a 5-year span. Michigan's numbers aren't going up compared to where they were back then during the 10-year war. So if Ohio State's numbers are going up, Michigan's numbers aren't. Wouldn't that mean there's a widening of some sort, of maybe a gap, if you will?
a gap of what? Of talent, perhaps? I mean, who's to say? I'll tell you what. I will start going around the field. I'll give you some time to think about this. How many first-round draft picks are on the current Michigan roster? Ready? You can think about that, okay? I'll go around the Ohio State roster and tell you the players that I think are potential first-round picks at some point. Ready?
You go.
Justin Fields. Probably not any of the running backs because that's just not a position you don't get. You get a lot of first-round draft picks right now. But wide receiver, Chris Olave, maybe. Garrett Wilson, maybe. Give me maybe one of the true freshman wide receivers at some point. Sure. Pick one of them. Maybe Harry Miller. Maybe Wyatt Davis. Maybe Paris Johnson or Nick Petit-Frere. They could potentially be first round draft picks at some point. Did I say Harry Miller? I'm not sure if I said Harry Miller, but Harry Miller. On defense, Zach Harrison, potentially Teron Vincent if he's healthy this year. Maybe Tommy Togiai. He's a first or second round draft pick. The linebackers are such a question that I don't know that I could name any one there, but Sean Wade, it probably is a first round draft pick at some point. Maybe one of the younger corners. Kerry Combs has enough of a history of churning out corners at a first round picks. I'd probably take one. Sean Wade and one person from the field in that corner room. Maybe Josh Proctor if he comes along and has a good season. He has the measurables to be a first round pick. Okay, so I don't know how many that is. Probably 10. Okay, go ahead and tell me the 10 players in Michigan who are going to be first-round draft picks in the next 5 years. Go.
I'm sorry, that's all the time we have for today's show. I was, even when I was preparing for this, I was thinking the same thing because I don't know, maybe, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, I'll say Ambry Thomas at corner. I don't believe it because he's not as good as other corners, but if you're asking me, you got to pick somebody, I would say him, maybe Daxton Hill because he was just a freshman this past year, and he was already doing some things. So we'll say Daxton Hill, and that's it. Even in this current draft, the 2020 draft, it looks like the top prospect will be center Cesar Ruiz, the first drafted, ahead of Donovan Peoples-Jones. And, maybe I don't even think Nico Collins is necessarily a first rounder. We'll see what he runs. But maybe he's another guy that you would put on there. But really, they have, and this is something that I was writing about a couple weeks ago and have periodically been getting back to it. They have 5 top 100 players on their roster. And so when you just look through those top 5, and it's Daxton Hill, who was the number 14 player in his class, Chris Hinton, who is a defensive tackle, was a freshman in this past class. He was the number 31 player. Then Zach Charbonnet was the running back, number 46 player in this past class. Luigi Villan, who has been hurt for most of his 3 years, was the number 57 player in his class. And Ambry Thomas was the number 90 player in his class. That's not a lot to choose from. But as you were going through all of these top 100 players for the Buckeyes, you're like, well, yeah, I could see that. I mean, I wrote down, trying to be conservative, I went down and I didn't even include anybody from the 2020 class. I just had Justin Fields, Sean Wade, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Wyatt Davis, Zach Harrison. And that was just being conservative. So, and the point of me doing that would be that in Harbaugh's time so far, if you extrapolate just those 6 players, we're talking 20 first rounders compared to Michigan's 4 or maybe 5 if Daxton Hill ends up a first rounder. And all due respect to Steve Dace, I appreciate what he's doing, but that's a talent gap, Tom.
Right. It's you have to spin the numbers so hard to come up with something else as the explanation. Now, I mean, this goes back to the Jim Harbaugh I'll answer your questions and not your insults when he was asked what's the difference between Ohio State and Michigan. This was after last year's game. And he said, the reporter said, I think it was Jordan Strack from Toledo, is this a talent gap? Is this a preparation gap? Is this a coaching gap? What is the biggest difference between you and Ohio State at this point? And he said, I'll answer your questions, not your insults. The actual answer is, yes, it's all of those things. It is a talent gap. Of course it's a talent gap. Is it a coaching gap? Yes. I don't think that there's anyone who's going to say that right now, 2019 or 2020, Jim Harbaugh is as good a coach as Ryan Day is so far based on what he's seen, but what we've seen out of him. And that the Ohio State coaching staff is not better top to bottom than the Michigan coaching staff is. And that the player development at Ohio State is not better than the player development at Michigan. Even when Michigan gets these top players, like Rashawn Gary or Jabril Peppers, they go from number 1 player in the country or number 2 player in the country or number 3 player in the country to like mid-first round draft pick. Like no one develops. Michigan doesn't have guys who turn from like, the 40th best player in the country to top 5 draft pick. Like it doesn't happen. And they do not have someone who is like Larry Johnson, who just churns out top high first round draft picks at his position group every year. They don't have that on their coaching staff. And add in those two things, add in the fact that Ohio State, Michigan people, everyone admits this, Ohio State takes that game more seriously than Michigan does. And so if Ohio State has better players, better coaches, and takes that game more seriously than Michigan does, and you're never going to have the game where Ohio State overlooks Michigan, the 2017 Iowa game, the 2018 Purdue game. Like that's never ever 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 going to be the Michigan game, because Ohio State will not allow themselves to overlook it, because that's how they have treated the game for 20 years now. That has been the one that is circled on the calendar ever since Jim Tressel showed up. John Cooper, God bless him, just didn't handle that game correctly. Jim Tressel handled it correctly, and it has been handled correctly ever since then. And you add those 3 things together, it's like, oh, well, that is how Ohio State has gone 17-2 against Michigan since 2001.
And I think part of what Steve is saying is that the gap isn't any more than it was before, and I think by him saying Ohio State has had more draft picks, he's saying there's a little bit, but Michigan was still winning back then and has definitely won their share. But I think what you and I are saying and what the data shows is that because Ohio State is winning more and more often and by bigger and bigger scores, there's some talent there that is responsible for that. Now, also, you have Hall of Fame coaches every step of the way, Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer, making that happen, going against Lloyd Carr, Rich Rodriguez, Brady Hoke, and Jim Harbaugh. So not exactly fair fight, but, it's not like Michigan had to hire those guys. They went out and made their decisions. Ohio State went out and made theirs. And the talent has followed. And I just don't see. I also don't really understand why going back and looking way back when really helps matters, because the game has also changed. So let's not forget that, or at least it has for Ohio State over the years. Now, granted, Michigan, Tom, did just start changing last year with their speed and space. So got to give them some time. Got to let Jim Harbaugh get his speed and space recruits in. Last year was just the first year of the speed and space era. And so then once that happens, then we can maybe start taking some real data down.
Yeah, Michigan football now featuring the shotgun. Ooh, exciting. It's just the problem with comparing stuff to the 1970s is there are no recruiting rankings to compare to in the 1970s. Like you have to use the NFL draft as your measuring stick, which okay, but recruiting rankings have certainly seemed to get more and more accurate as time goes along, as there are camps and people get to see these kids in person. It's not just I heard from a coach that this kid's pretty good, so therefore this kid is pretty good. The recruiting industry has changed so much in the last 20 years, let alone, there was no recruiting industry 40 years ago. So, it's impossible to make real cross-generational comparisons on that front. But now, you talked about the number of top 100 players on the rosters of these teams right now. some of these guys have left, but from the 2017 class till the 2021 class, so that's, the Jeff Okuda, Chase Young, J.K. Dobbins class, through the kids who are committed for the upcoming season, for the upcoming February 2021 signing class. There are 55 top 100 players between Ohio State and Michigan. Would you like to guess how many of those players are Ohio State commits versus Michigan commits?
48.
44. 44 to 11. And 2018, 2019, and 2020, the totals are 23 for Ohio State and 3 for Michigan. 23 to 3 top 100 commits in the 2018, 2019, and 2020 classes. I mean, if you are trying to tell me that there's not a talent gap, you're either arguing, you have to be arguing that recruiting rankings are meaningless. That's the only way you can possibly be arguing that there's not a talent gap there. Because of course it is. 23 to 3 in the 2018 to 2020 classes. It's if you believe in recruiting rankings, and if you have followed, there is an extraordinarily strong correlation between 5 stars and becoming a first-round draft pick. Like you're, 44 times or something like that more likely to be a first-round NFL draft pick if you're a 5-star than a 3-star. So if you believe in the history and the track record of those numbers, then it's basically impossible to look at 23 versus 3 top 100 prospects over a 3-year span and go, no. This isn't a talent gap. And I can't imagine that anyone seriously thinks that.
Well, you mentioned if you do this, then if you believe there's no talent gap, then you must not pay attention to recruiting rankings. Well, here, he actually uses the recruiting rankings to prove his point even further. And that brings us to his third point, that the average recruit ranking, according to the 24/7 composite of all the recruiting services for the 2016-2019 classes, that's the composite from 2016 to 2019, which made up last season's rosters, Clemson's average recruit rank was a 91.4 ranking. They weren't the 91st player in the nation. They have a ranking of 0 to 100. And so Clemson was 91.4, Michigan was 90.1. And he goes on to say that is statistically insignificant. And then he writes, didn't Clemson beat Ohio State in the college football playoff last season? And technically, yes, they did beat Ohio State. But if you look at this and say, wow, look, Clemson 91.4, Michigan 90.1, there's not much difference there, then that data is shaky, because you can look at them on the field and see a whole bunch of difference. And if you, for instance, all of these rankings, the average ranking per player, that's the 91.4 to 90.1, gets so dragged down by the bottom of a class. Like Ohio State, their roster, which I have here on a spreadsheet, and their average rankings, let's see here, 33 players who are ranked in the top 100 on the roster currently. But the average ranking of each Ohio State player is 265th. That's the bottom just reduces or just increases the average and really skews the data. Michigan, their average player, 414th. So there's the 265, 414 don't seem so bad, because Ohio State's 265 kind of looks a little off. Now Penn State, let's see, I haven't even looked to see what theirs is. So where do they end up? They are 411, because they have a bunch of guys ranked out of the top 1,000, and each team has guys that are outside of the top 1,000. What I did for those guys, I just ranked them 999. It's statistically insignificant, as Steve would say. If you're saying that, really, wow, 1.3 points, that does, whatever that means, Michigan and Clemson are pretty close, then then you have bad numbers down.
Well, okay, you want to look at I just pulled up the 2018 class as an example. Mm-hmm. 2018, Michigan and Clemson. The average rating for Clemson was about 5 points higher than Michigan. So this is okay. This is a little bit of an outlier year, but the highest, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 highest recruits between those two classes all went to Clemson.
Yeah,
Clemson has 8 players ranked higher than anyone who went to Michigan, and I mean there are other reasons. Clemson is an outlier in terms of development of players. Mm-hmm. Compared to just about anywhere else in the country. They are the one team that finishes, in the 8 to 10 range in the recruiting rankings, and but generates, top 5 results every year. Michigan has not developed players the way that Clemson has developed players. It's just not the same. And you look at the 2017 class for Michigan was their best class, I think, probably of the last decade. I'm guessing that was the class of Donovan Peoples-Jones, Aubrey Solomon, Cesar Ruiz, Luigi Villan, Drew Singleton, Ambry Thomas. That's 6 top 100 players in that class. How many of those players panned out? Donovan Peoples-Jones had a nice career, but was never actually an impact player. Like he's one of those like, boy, you really would have probably had a better career at Ohio State kind of guys. Mm-hmm. He, number 12 overall player in the country, 5-star player, I don't think he ever had a more than maybe 600-yard receiving season, and is going to be like maybe a second-round draft pick, something like that. Hard to argue he really got developed or utilized well at Michigan. Aubrey Solomon, gone, transferred. Cesar Ruiz had a nice career, 4-star player, 47 in the country. And he's going to be, maybe a second-round pick. Where he's going to be one of their better. Yeah, Luigi Villan, number 57 overall, has been hurt, hasn't really played. Drew Singleton, number 79 overall, he transferred, right? Yep. He's gone. And then Ambry Thomas, who's number 90 overall. He's one of the people that was like, maybe he could be a first-round pick, maybe. And so you've got 6 top 100 players, and it's like, okay, Donovan Peoples-Jones was fine. Cesar Ruiz had a nice career, but not, like All-American kind of career or anything like that. And Ambry Thomas has been fine. That's fine. And that's the great class for Michigan's 6 top 100 players. Let's look at Clemson's top 100 players that same year. T. Higgins. Yup. Good. Hunter Johnson, who did not pan out and is now at Northwestern. But the 2018 class, Trevor Lawrence. Yep. Yeah, he's worked out okay. Xavier Thomas was a contributor on this team. Jackson Carman, contributor on the team. Justin Ross, starter on the team. Jackson Carman started. Justin Ross started. They have starters on national championship caliber team, and like a bunch of them. KJ Henry. It's not possible to think that Michigan develops players in the way that Clemson does. It's just, it's not possible to look at the rankings and the results and come to any other conclusion that, development's also an issue for Michigan. Like, they're not recruiting as well as at Ohio State, but they're also not developing players very well. So, this goes back to the Harbaugh thing. Is it talent? Is it coaching? The answer is yes.
Yeah, well, looking at that 2016 Clemson class, Kayvon Wallace, outside of the top 1,000, he's the number 99 safety, a 3-star prospect. He started this past year. I assume he was a multi-year starter. Isaiah Simmons, going to be a top 5 pick. He was the number 451 player overall, the number 25 safety, a 3-star guy out of Kansas. So there's that eye for talent and the development. Now, going back to the Michigan 2016 class, which had 6 guys in the top 100 and a 7th and 8th that were really close. Like Kareem Walker was 107. So that guy didn't pan out. But Rashawn Gary, yeah, okay. Ben Bredesen, yes. Brandon Peters, no. He ended up transferring. David Long played. Devin Asiasi, the tight end, transferred. Michael Onwenu played. But in terms of what, there was only 4 of the top 10 and Michigan's 2016 class even played this past season. So to even include them in the rankings against Clemson they weren't there. So why would you use them to show you how close they were in talent to Clemson this year, when the top guys in the 2016 class, only 40% of them were even on the roster. But then he continues, and let me get over there to point number 4, which is the average recruit ranking according to the composite between LSU and Michigan's rosters last year. 90.8 for LSU, Michigan 90.1. And just again, furthers the point that you can't furthers the point that these stats are pretty terrible, because, Tom, if you put LSU and Michigan on the same field last year, do you think we would see a talent gap?
Do you remember the scene in The Shining where the elevator doors open?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that is what I think.
Oh.
And here's the other thing. Let me read you Clemson's records from 2012 to 2018. I'm sorry, LSU's records from 2012 to 2018. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
10-3, 10-3, 8-5, 9-3, 8-4, 9-4, 10-3. You know who that sounds like?
Sounds like Michigan.
So 2019 LSU is Michigan if they got a generational quarterback, had all of their talent hit, and also got maybe one of the greatest assistant coach hires in the last decade, all to happen simultaneously. Like, if you're hoping to follow the LSU roadmap to win the national championship, like, good luck, friends. That was an incredible hot streak at the craps table, and just going, well, why doesn't everyone do this? Like, well, you're going to crap out sometimes. Michigan has crapped out pretty much every year. LSU just got an incredible hot streak last year, and guess what? This year they're probably going back to 10-3, 9-4. Like, that's the talent is not there for them to have everything fall exactly right again this year. Like, they're going to regress to where they were probably before, because they don't have Joe Burrow anymore. They don't have Joe Brady there anymore. They're lost all this talent. And also, LSU has a recruiting area that is infinitely more talented in the trenches than Michigan's does. The South is good at a bunch of different stuff, but producing big old linemen is a real strength down there. And that's an area where Michigan has not had a ton of success. And that's not an area where Michigan can just rely on a ton of great in-state talent every year. It doesn't. LSU, just go through the number of defensive tackles Louisiana produces over a 10-year span versus Michigan, and it's like, oh, that's not really the same thing at all. Like, the talent at certain spots that are really crucial spots, that LSU has a real home state advantage over Michigan. It's one of the reasons why, like, California has stopped producing defensive tackles on close to the same level as some of the Deep South states. And that's one of the reasons that the Pac-12 is struggling in kind of national matchup. Like, they don't have the talent in the trenches, which is not the sexiest spot to look at. It's not like, oh, look, they've got a quarterback. Like, you have to look at the other positions too. And Michigan as a state just doesn't produce talent in the trenches like some of those Deep South states do.
But, Tom, do you know what the South is not as good at doing as the North is, and places like Michigan? Do you know?
Social distancing?
That's right. They won't stay home. Just stay home.
The SEC is going to cost Ohio State a chance at a national championship this year because they can't stay home. It's be real sad. Don't you people care about football? I thought that's all you cared about.
Right.
Stay home, you monsters.
Just stay home. Stop going places. Then the number 5 point here is, yes, Ohio State is likely to have 2 of the top 5 picks in the draft this year. However, against Michigan, Chase Young and Jeff Okudah combined for just 1 tackle, 2 quarterback hurries, 0 sacks, 0 tackles for loss, and 0 interceptions. And yet the Wolverines still lost by 29 points. And here, I think Steve is helping our argument with pretty much every word here. Because, Tom, how many offensive linemen did it take for Michigan to keep Chase Young from posting really any stats?
Right. This is something where like this is like lies, damn lies, and statistics. This is somewhere between the first and the second one for sure. Because I mean, you have two offensive linemen blocking him just about every play, holding him. And Jeff Okudah, like, yeah, if you don't throw at a cornerback all game, he's not going to have a lot of tackles. Like, yeah, that's true. Guess what? That means one of your receivers was not part of the game plan, which that's what a corner wants to do. Congratulations, he did his job.
When Chris Spielman had 29 tackles or whatever against Michigan, it's not because the Buckeyes were stopping the run. It's because they weren't. So a bunch of tackles is not necessarily a good thing. And a bunch of tackles for a corner means a bunch of catches that you're giving up. And so ideally, you would want 0 tackles if you're just going to be in coverage all day. And that's, to point those two out, to me, it feels like, well, what? I need a 5th point here. What can what? Let's just throw that one out there. And just this whole exercise, for me, it reminded me of when, back in the Rich Rod era, when certain Michigan bloggers would try to pull any kind of data out of, say, the trends of 2008 to 2009 to 2010, say, see, look, things are heading up in every area. And it's like, yeah, but if that up still doesn't reach any meaningful baseline, you're still way below average on everything. And it doesn't matter if things are trending up and you're still getting killed 5 or 6 times a year. And for me, this is kind of like that, where you're searching for data that tells you that things aren't so bleak. All the while, if you would just look at the scoreboard, you would see like, well, you know what? Things do look kind of bad. And yeah, there's been some close games, but those are kind of almost fewer and farther between, especially of late. And there's nothing, Tom, nothing showing us that this gap that we believe is there. We may be the only 2 people in the world that believe it's there, but there's nothing showing that it's not even that it's closing. There's nothing showing that it's not going to get wider, because Ohio State continues to outpace Michigan in recruiting. What do they have? I don't even remember anymore. How many top 100 commits do they have now? Is it 9? Is it 8? Something like that is it more than that now of their 15 commits?
Ohio State?
Yeah.
For 2021, Ohio State has a 10-2 advantage in top 100 commits for 2021. 10-2.
Is that a lot? Is that bad?
It sounds like a lot. Does that here? Let me put it in perspective. From 2017 to 2021, Michigan has had 11 top 100 commits. In 2021 alone, Ohio State has 10. Mm-hmm. Seems like a lot. I don't know. I'm new here. I'm not sure. Just you look at the series history, and it's like, yes, the 2016 game was very close. That is very true. Do you know how many of the last 6 games outside of that one were decided by 10 points or less?
How many?
The answer is 0.
Oh.
0. So, and yes, the 2014 game was close for a while until it wasn't. The 2015 game was never close. The 2017 game was close for a while, but Ohio State had a redshirt freshman quarterback on the road and still won by 11 points. And then the last 2 years have just been like, whoops, into the wood chipper with you. So I just, and 2020, assuming there's a 2020 Ohio State-Michigan game, it's going to be played in Columbus with Ohio State with a veteran quarterback, probably better players pretty much everywhere on the field, and probably a better coaching staff, probably doing a better job of developing players. Like, what kind of money line would you have to get to bet on Michigan? Like,
well, where are the refs from? The
eternal question.
Although, Tom,
that's what. Yeah,
they're things are going to be evened up this year because everybody has online courses now. Everybody's taking online classes. So I would say it's a pick 'em.
There you go.
3 points for home field. 3 points.
There you go. Yeah. So, yeah. And it's just, that the series has not been competitive since 2007. Ohio State has won by 11, 35, 11, 30. They lost a 2011 game. They won by 5. They won by 1 in Urban Meyer's first 2 years. Then they won by 14, 29, 3 in double overtime, 11, and 23 and 29. So it's just, it has for literally a generation basically not been a competitive football game. And I don't, with the game being in Columbus, I don't know why. Outside of like the, weird stuff might happen this fall because of all the uncertainty and the weird schedules and all that kind of stuff. Like, if this game was at the beginning of the year, you could talk yourself into like, yeah, maybe something weird will happen. If there's, even if Ohio State plays an 8-game season or something like that this year, and we can talk about that on our next show, but, even if they do, like, you've got to figure they're probably firing at all cylinders by the time they get to the end of the year. And you've got a first-time starter Michigan quarterback and playing on the road and in Columbus and with probably disadvantages along both lines. Like, I don't know why you would think that this would happen for Michigan this year. So then it's another year where they probably get blown out.
Well, you know what? That's fine, I guess. I guess fans would accept that. I don't want to make anybody angry right now. We're all just trying to make it as we can without going anywhere. So you say Ohio State has 10 top 100 commits right now in the 2021 class, and I believe you because I'm looking at it. That's twice as many top 100 players as Michigan has on its entire roster right now. And that's with Ohio State being, say, 60% done with this class, and with them still in on 2 5-star guys out of Washington, Barrett Carter out of Georgia, a linebacker that they're in on, and any number of other prospects. And sure, Michigan's going to sign a couple more, and they'll get a couple more top 100 guys, but it may just be a couple more. And they may end up being, a third of Ohio State's number just in this class. And as I mentioned before, Ohio State's 2020 team will have 33 top 100 players compared to Michigan's 5. And I think Ohio State has 21 players. I could, but they've got over 20 players. I think maybe 23 that were ranked first or second at their position in recruiting. And now some of that's not always a great figure because that includes DeMario McCall, who is a fifth-year senior who hasn't really done anything, but it gives you an idea. Whereas Michigan, I think, has 2. Yeah, they do have 2. One is Daxton Hill. One is Quinn Nordine, their kicker. Those are their only 2 players who are ranked in the top 2 at their respective positions. They've got 19 guys ranked in the top 10 at their respective positions as recruits. And Ohio State on my last look, I think they're at like 43. So wherever you look for this talent gap, and notice when we talked about the recruiting rankings, what Steve talked about with the comparing Michigan to Clemson and Michigan to LSU, there was no Michigan to Ohio State comparison. He just used other teams who had success. And what those 2 other teams have, and you mentioned it, Tom, but Clemson has generational quarterbacks in Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. LSU gets it in Joe Burrow. Michigan, as we have talked about many, many times, they get quarterbacks and they don't do crap with them. And as I've said here time and again, the longer a quarterback is with Jim Harbaugh, the worse he gets. And now you've got 3 or 4 unproven guys. There'll be 4 scholarship quarterbacks on Michigan's roster this year. No experience other than Dylan McCaffrey coming in sometimes to run the ball and Joe Milton coming in sometimes to do stuff at the end of a game. And now you're trusting that Jim Harbaugh is going to be able to turn one of these guys into Like the best case scenario would be, can you be 2015 Jake Rudock or 2016 Wilton Speight? Because that's the pinnacle of Jim Harbaugh's Michigan quarterbacks at this point. And the fact that he can't, maybe Shea Patterson last year was the pinnacle, but these are, I don't know that pinnacle is the right word, Tom, when we're talking about the success levels of Michigan quarterbacks under Jim Harbaugh. And certainly if you're going to compare your recruiting to LSU and Clemson, they've done it because of their quarterbacks. You mentioned the defensive line, but Kelly Bryant, I don't think he won a national title with Clemson. And we know Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and Joe Burrow are all just elite players, leaders, talent. And that's not anything we have seen from Michigan quarterbacks, running backs, defensive ends, offensive tackles, receivers. We haven't seen that level of play anywhere at Michigan in a long time. And to compare Michigan to LSU or Clemson without factoring in things like that, it's kind of meaningless, even though it did give us something to talk about.
As you were talking about the pinnacle of Michigan quarterback play under Jim Harbaugh, you know what it reminds me of? Are you familiar with Campbell Hill?
I don't know.
Campbell Hill is in Bellefontaine, Ohio.
Yes.
It stands 1,550 feet tall. It is the highest point in the state of Ohio. So you can go up to the highest point of the state of Ohio. Have you ever been there?
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, let me tell you. It is located in the parking lot of a community college. So you pull into the community college right off the highway. If you happen to be going up 33, I think it's 33, but up in Bellefontaine, just get right off the highway, hang a right, and there's a community college just on the right there. You just pull in, park in the parking lot. You can walk right over. There's a nice little Ohio Historical Society placard there, and hey, I've been to the highest point in the state of Ohio. That's Michigan quarterbacks under Jim Harbaugh. Like, oh, wow, this is the highest point. And it's like, oh, this is just like, literally my backyard is a better sledding hill than what this is. But it's the highest point. So yes, this is the pinnacle. This is the pinnacle of Ohio in terms of elevation. And this is the pinnacle of Michigan quarterbacks under Jim Harbaugh. Jake Rudock losing 42-13 at home in 2015. That's it. That is the high point. Enjoy. That's great. And, I think Ohio State's quarterback play has gotten just a little higher than that. So, I don't know. You can never say never because Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins were both sitting behind JT Barrett in 2017. So, you can never say never and you can't assume, but Dylan McCaffrey didn't beat out Shea Patterson last year. Or the year before that. Joe Milton didn't beat out Shea Patterson that last year or the year before that. And Shea Patterson was like one of the most he is what he is quarterbacks by the end of his career. It was just like, yep, this is what this guy is, and this is what the ceiling is, and it's not that great. It is Campbell Hill, and McCaffrey not being able to beat him out. I thought when they signed McCaffrey, like, oh, this is a guy from a serious football family, Ed McCaffrey's kid. What's his name? McCaffrey, who was the running back at Stanford, his brother. Like this is a serious football family. Christian McCaffrey, yes. This is a serious football family. Like this could be someone that really is nope, not yet. He's been there a few years, and there's been no indication that it's going to be anything taller than Campbell Hill. So
now, JJ McCarthy is the five-star quarterback committed to Michigan in 2021. He's the number 13 player overall, number 2 pro-style quarterback. And that might be the end of Jim Harbaugh. If nothing comes of him, then for one, you would think that the levels of success you are not reaching is probably going to do you in as a head coach. Those two, that might be Michigan's last starting quarterback under Jim Harbaugh, or it will be the kickstart needed to continue to propel them forward. Kind of like, I would say JT Barrett did, but maybe more Dwayne Haskins, to where quarterbacks saw, you know what, we're going to get to throw the ball here. We can progress, because Dwayne Haskins was highly ranked, but I don't even know if he was a top 100 player by the time he signed. He was, one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the nation, which that probably put him around 150 or something like that. But whatever happens with J.J. McCarthy, assuming that he will get to play for Jim Harbaugh, and assuming that he doesn't listen to this podcast and think, you know what, being an Illinois guy, maybe it would be better if I just stayed home and and played for the Illini like Brandon Peters did last year.
It's interesting. You go from Brandon Peters in Illinois. Who is he playing for? Lovie Smith and his glorious quarantine beard. I mean, think about how good Lovie Smith's quarantine beard has got to be. Like, boom, full circle. We're done.
Do you think by now his beard like just wraps around the back of his neck? Like, is it just, have they become like shoulder pads or like some fur thing that you wear around your collar, or do you think it's just becoming fuller, but it hasn't gone crazy yet?
No, I think thicker and more lustrous is definitely where that is right now. That's I think it is nothing but greatness is my prediction for Lovie Smith's quarantine beard. And
you know what? All it would take was one Zoom call from Lovie Smith to J.J. McCarthy, and who knows, maybe boom, you're like, you see that, and you're like, I want to commit. Can I sign right now? Do you have a letter of intent that I can have? And Lovie would be like, whoa. It's a dead period right now, and we're not even in that time where we can sign you. But if you want, I can send you a promise ring. But all right, Tom, that's going to do it. Do you have anything else you want to add before we go?
No, I just had an image of Lovie Smith mailing a bunch of recruits half of one of those best friends promise necklaces that girls had in like elementary school, where like half says best and half says friends. Like that's I think where their recruiting is, and when it picks up, you'll know why. But other than that, no. Other than that, no. I think I'm good.
And what he also sends along with the ring is snippets of his beard in case the ring is too big. You can wrap the hair around the ring and make it smaller, like the girls used to do in high school and whatnot. And boom, there you go. You've got an awesome ring, and you look at your hand, and you're thinking, that's from Lovie Smith. And I can't wait to be an Illini. I cannot wait to be a Fighting Illini, which probably the first time anybody has ever said that was just me right now. So we want to thank you all for listening. Take care of everybody. Take care of yourselves out there. Stay home. If you want to watch some football this year, just stay home. And if you know anybody in the South, tell them to get their butts back home. Sit on their porch, sit on their couch, sit in the backyard, shoot at squirrels, and just take it easy. And we want to thank you all for listening. We will talk to you guys
This feeling's getting stronger. I can't take it anymore. Des Moines.